On this episode of Athletic Training Chat, we have Jen Sturtevant, who is a secondary school athletic trainer plus has clinical responsibilities more on the administrative side through Tufts Medical and really has done quite a bit within that realm. But we are talking about her work on inclusivity, and we really spent a lot of time defining that, really talking about the barriers that people from marginalized groups can run into when it comes to healthcare. In this particular episode, we are specifically talking about the LGBTQIA plus community. Jen just recently took over the committee chair position of the LGBTQ plus for the NATA, and we also talk about that. Along with that, we also talk about inclusive leadership and get into some of the difficult things that are leadership, but really how they can have such a meaningful impact in people's lives. So lots of great stuff to cover in this. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Please check them out. They've got a lot of new stuff coming out. The cold tubs have been released, which are great for portable or storage issues as they're inflatable. Their Revive system, which is taking pneumatic compression to the next level. Be sure to check out Mueller Sports Medicine and all their new and happening things going on. And without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Episode of Athletic Training Chat. This is one we've been trying to get going for a little while, but as all ATs know, especially now, scheduling is its own unique battle. But we are on today with Jen Sturtevant, which I think I got that pretty close, to talk about inclusivity in AT and just kind of in healthcare across the board. Jen is the committee chair of the LGBTQ plus advisory committee at the NATA. If you have followed them on Twitter, they have been extremely active, putting out really good stuff. It's been wonderful to learn and read and do all those things. So thank you for that. But before we kind of start getting into some of our topics, just wanted to turn it over to you, Jen, to kind of fill in your background, both as a clinically practicing athletic trainer and then working now on as the committee chair at the national level.
All right. Well, thanks, Joel. So just to give a little bit of background on myself, I went to Salem State University, which is in Salem, Massachusetts, the Witch City. So probably a lot of people are familiar with the city itself. Originally from Cape Cod, so have been in Mass all my life. But graduated back in 2000 with my bachelor's degree, athletic training, was certified, and was a little burnt out from school, not going to lie. So kind of went in a different direction for a couple of years, but came back to athletic training and started working for Tufts Medicine or Melrose Wakefield Hospital and do outreach services to one of the local high schools. So I've been doing that now for 18 years. And I have my master's. I have an MBA. I did not do my graduate schooling in athletic training. I wanted to give myself some more opportunities and kind of broaden my skill set and my knowledge. So I did an MBA through Salem State as well, a few years after graduating from undergrad. So and just kind of worked my way up. So I started out as just the athletic trainer providing outreach services. I'm now currently serving as the ambulatory services supervisor for the hospital while still providing the sports medicine services and overseeing our athletic training and sports med program. We currently have 7 full-time athletic trainers working under me with a bunch of per diems and a lot of different high school contracts. So it's been great. It's been a great experience. And part of that, I've been able to kind of grow my passion and motivation for advocacy work and, allyship work and stuff. So it was funny. I've never really volunteered or been involved in any NATA stuff, whether it be at the state level, whether it be district level or the national level. I would go to conferences and stuff, but I was never
Hmm.
really involved. And when I saw the call go out that they were looking for a District 1 representative for the LGBTQ plus committee back in 2018, at first I was shocked that they had that kind of committee. I thought that was great. Obviously, it was new. And I, I thought to myself, I love this work. I'm true being part of the LGBTQ plus community myself. It was something that hit home for me. But, again, not having any volunteer experience or anything at any level, I almost didn't actually apply for it. I just, and then I go, you know what? I know some people at the NATA level. Let me touch base with them and see what they think. And they said, put your name in the hat. You have no idea. You never know. So I did. Um, and I interviewed, and there were, I think, 3 applicants at the time, and they narrowed it down. And I honestly think part of why I was chosen initially was because of my role working in a hospital system at the secondary school level. I think
Hmm.
it provided a different perspective. A lot of the people who are already on the committee from the other districts did not work in this kind of setting. And so I think that was part of the appeal. I was also at the time working and volunteering on the hospital LGBTQ plus resource committee. So I had some of that experience in my background as well. But yeah, so I started out as the District 1 rep, 2018. And oh my God, what an amazing experience. It's been awesome. The people on the committee, I've learned so much. I've grown so much personally and professionally from it. And then when the opportunity came up, Dr. Rebecca Lopez was her term was up as chair. And I went for it. And again, this is, selected me, and here I am. And I took over as chair this past June.
Okay.
Um, so just kind of getting going, but we're still, still got the steamboat going. I mean, it's a ride. We've got a lot of work going on, a lot of passionate people, a lot of new committee members, but really just trying to do what we can for the membership and for our patients. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Awesome. Quick aside, just because of the changing landscape of education, back to your MBA real quick.
Mhm.
How, just as briefly as you can or you would like to, how has going that route of doing something outside of the profession helped benefit you maybe in your just career, both clinically, professionally, job related, but even potentially with some of this committee related work that you've done?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So um, I try to be neutral. When I used to be a preceptor, a lot of students would ask, when they were going on to grad school, like, what should they study? And I said, listen, I have people who have gone and done their graduate work with athletic training, or more specific, maybe exercise phys or kinesiology or something along that lines. A lot of times it's because they wanted to teach. But for me, I knew I didn't want to go that route. I knew I did not want to be an educator. Nothing against that. I think it's great. I'm really happy. It just wasn't for me. And I felt, for me clinically, that I was going to know as much of the basics as I needed to know, and I could continue to grow on my own and learn new skills on my own. And I really wanted to get more into, my ultimate goal was being more in a supervisory management type position. And so I thought an MBA, at the time, Salem State didn't have a master's of like public health or health administration.
Sure.
And so the MBA was kind of like the next choice. I mean, when you really think about it, athletic training is a business, just like everything else.
Right.
There's different areas, different departments, everything kind of has to work together. And so my focus, though, with the MBA was more on leadership, management and stuff. But I learned so much just in terms of even in the marketing field, the operations side of things. That was really huge, to get some knowledge there on how things operate, and how to develop those strategies and stuff like that. But really, with the ultimate focus on leadership and how to work with teams and how to engage people and how to motivate them and how to be, an effective leader. And so that kind of started more my leadership passion, and then tying that in with all the advocacy work, it just kind of really fit together. But it's allowed me to move up, especially in a healthcare organization. These are the things that these are the types of degrees that a lot of healthcare administrators have, is those MBAs or
Mm-hmm.
MPHs and stuff.
Sure.
So it's really that was I did my MBA back in 2010, and I'm still seeing the positive effects from that.
Awesome. Thank you for that short aside.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, no problem.
so kind of jumping into this episode that, the inclusivity that we were talking about. First, I was wondering if you could kind of just help set a definition, kind of set a baseline. I know just in our short conversation so far, we've referred to LGBTQ plus, but then there's also other ones with IA included.
Hmm.
And just so if you wouldn't mind from your vantage point, just kind of explaining what that is so everybody's kind of working from the same working definition as we keep talking about this community and this group as we get into more of the questions.
Sure. So LGBTQ plus is obviously probably the most common acronym. So if people aren't aware, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and then the plus is supposed to indicate all the other identities and orientations that exist. And recently, you'll notice in a lot of publications and text that goes out that we say LGBTQIA plus. So we're including intersex and asexual, and then adding the plus. So it's a little bit more inclusive of an acronym when you add the IA. Obviously, our committee name is still LGBTQ plus. There's been talk on if we'd like to change that, but I think for now, we're leaving the committee name as that. But if anything that we put out, we're making sure to include it as LGBTQIA plus. It really just ultimately makes it more inclusive.
Perfect. I appreciate the just kind of setting that
Yeah, short
for
and sweet.
everyone. Yep, no, I just think it sets a really good foundation just for the further conversations going on from this. So one of the really broad question, and this may answer a few of them as we get going. What are the biggest barriers for this community when it comes to health? And that's both in athletic training, but then you have unique vantage point from working in a hospital system, and you mentioned serving on committees within that broader healthcare.
Mhm.
So maybe let's just start with the AT community first, just since that's kind of
I think uh, definitely with the AT community, the one of the biggest challenges I think is there's still a lack of understanding or education, specifically probably more around transgender patients and what the AT role would be if you had somebody who's transgender. I think part of the challenge too is, some people, just like everyone, a lot of people are like, well, yeah, it's a safe space. My area is a safe space. People can come and talk to me, but is it truly? Sometimes you don't realize, that, I'll totally age myself. I'm in my early 40s, and I know what it was like back in the 90s, and the terminology that was used and the jokes that were made, and maybe people didn't feel like they were offensive or didn't really think anything of it at the time. But now it's just more noticed. It's more, people are more aware. And so, for instance, I'll give an example. Working at a high school, you hear a lot where kids will say, oh, that's so gay, or you're so gay. And they laugh about it and they joke about it. But when you have somebody else who might be hearing that, somebody who maybe isn't comfortable with their identity or comfortable with their sexual orientation or hasn't really been able to be confident or be out with that, um, that's going to turn them away, because that's an insult, that's offensive to them. But when everybody else is just kind of joking about it and nothing's really addressed, you as the athletic trainer might not even necessarily notice or
Hmm.
recognize that if you're not paying attention. And it might cause somebody to not feel comfortable coming to that space, not because of you, but maybe just because of what's going on around you with the other kids. And
Sure.
so I think as ATs right there, that's a barrier, right? Because they don't potentially feel comfortable coming to you again, maybe not necessarily because of you themselves, but because of the behavior and the language that's used in that space by other kids or by other patients. And so whether or not, again, you're in a clinic, wherever, whatever setting you work at, the collegiate setting, you can have that. You can have adults who make jokes like that, because they, again, not thinking anything of it, or they are just being purposely discriminatory
Sure.
because some people use their religious beliefs, some people just have their personal beliefs about it. And so as athletic trainers, we have the ability and the power to make our spaces as safe as possible. We might not always be able to control other spaces, but we certainly can control our own. And so really setting those boundaries and addressing, when you hear little jokes like that, little micro, call them microaggressions. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that, addressing those right away and saying, hey, you know what, that's not appropriate, because you don't know how that might be affecting that. That's probably offensive to a lot of people. And so, and you just don't even know it. I know we've gotten some feedback. I did a talk for VNATA last summer, last June of 2021, with Sean Rogers, one of my colleagues on the committee. And we did like a case scenario about a transgender patient, high school student.
Hmm.
And some of the feedback we got for that, I'm going to be fully honest here, was that people felt the information was fine, but they didn't feel they needed to hear it because they don't have any patients or students that are LGBTQIA+. And I'm thinking in my head, well, how do you even know that? You don't know that.
Right.
And even if you didn't, even if you knew for sure that at that time you didn't, inclusion is for everybody, right? It's not just for LGBTQIA plus people. It's not just for people of different races or ethnicities or abilities. Inclusion is specifically targeted for everybody, and it makes everybody's situation better, not just for one group of people.
Hmm.
And so, but that's really some of the biggest barriers, is that the space itself isn't safe. It's not affirming. And so what happens is people don't seek out care because they're afraid to go. They're afraid to be being discriminated against. They don't want to be misgendered. They don't want to be called by the wrong name or the wrong pronouns. And so they don't go, and so they don't get their preventative care, they don't get follow-up care when they're sick. And so it leads to a lot of, that's why, especially within the LGBTQIA plus population, there's a lot of health and healthcare disparities that exist. And it's mainly because of facing discriminatory behavior in that setting. So that's honestly one of the biggest challenges and the biggest barriers that particular population faces.
Yeah, I think, just thinking back of my own life, making jokes and things that in hindsight, like what terrible, and not only because it was bad for discriminatory reasons or it could make, but it wasn't necessary in most
Mhm.
instances. There was no need to go and use that route for any specific reason, because it didn't add anything to whatever was being discussed, or it's not like it was making
the conversation could have been just fine without it. But yeah, I think to your point about some of the feedback, I think that's really interesting. I've had this conversation with some people just about multiple things, but is it, you know, is it seemingly more common now with, or are we just more aware of it that, more people are coming out as transgender? Is it because there's a growing comfort with it that they feel like they can, and it's always been that way, just nobody recognized it and knew, just
Hmm.
because it was, as you mentioned, a different time,
Hmm.
and whatnot. And so I think for people to kind of understand that there probably is someone in
Absolutely.
that community and you have no idea, and or have no
Absolutely.
idea, you have to be aware of that. And
Hmm.
for a lot of us, like, I've tried to think about this, like, how do you have conversations? Myself, I'm the heterosexual white guy from the Midwest, middle class. Yeah, I just right across the board, like, have never felt discriminated against in my life because I've never been in that situation from where I've been. So how do you get potentially someone like myself to sit there and be like, yeah, here's how it would feel. Now I've had
Hmm.
the privilege of traveling overseas where you are the one
Hmm.
that's not, that you don't fit in, and it's a strange feeling, and it's one that I think is
Yeah.
worth experiencing so you can at least have some semblance of, never that it's comparing apples to apples, but an idea of what that feels like.
Right. Right. And you bring up a good point, Joel, because one of the things we talk a lot about in our trainings about, inclusive environments and how to be that is that allies. So people who are in a position of quote unquote privilege, right? Like
Hmm.
you said, being the heterosexual white um, male that hasn't really experienced that discrimination. You are the ones who actually have the power, because when we think about it, if you have somebody like yourself, advocating and being that ally for others who don't have that same privilege, it can be actually a lot more impactful and affect people, because they're looking, people who are just like you are looking at you and going, oh, okay, maybe there is something to this. Maybe we should be paying attention. Maybe we should be listening. Whereas if it's coming from, I hope not, but sometimes when it's coming from the people who are experiencing it, people will
Right.
say, well, of course they're going to advocate. Of course they're going to, do that. And so that's part of being a great inclusive leader. It's not, it's recognizing that other people have different experiences, and you have to understand that you want to be able to be an active listener. You want to be able to try to understand them, and in order to be able to do that, you have to listen with empathy. You have to not be willing, you can't be judgmental. You have to be very humble in your own self to really just try to understand others. So it's a great point to bring up.
You brought up inclusive leadership, which was kind of our other topic that we had on this, so very well transitioned on your part. um, how would you define inclusive leadership? And I know that's a big question. I was tried to think about just the pure definition of leadership, but throwing another description on it can always make it that much more complex. But how would you define that?
Well, I mean, and I know I even saw the questions ahead of time, and I'm still, yeah, God, it's really hard to put into words, but it's, I think it's being able to bring people together, bring people to the table, but not just bring them to the table, but how to actively engage, how to make sure that um, things are equitable, right? We talk a lot about equity within inclusion, where it's not just having access to the same resources, but making sure that each individual has the appropriate resources for them to be able to succeed the same way as the person next to them, right?
Yep.
Because someone like you, and compared to somebody who's of a different race, ethnicity, LGBTQIA plus status, needs different resources and needs different access points, right, to be able to achieve that high level. So being an inclusive leader is recognizing that, and that it's not just a standard for everybody in the group. You have to know what, the abilities, the strengths, really get to know each individual person and find out what they need to be able to be their best selves. And so I think that's, part of being that inclusive leader. It's hard to really pinpoint a definition, but to me, that's what I would go with.
I think you hit on some super important points there. The ability to help influence people in a positive and ethical way. I think that's a round leadership definition. But then I think the more I've dove into it, and I like the idea of transformational leadership and servant leadership. I think that all you mentioned played in is that's the really hard part, is figuring out what each individual needs in order to succeed, and this going to the next level of it, just beyond like a staff that you have that may all kind of look the same and what they need to succeed in their role, but going beyond that. And that just makes leadership and its definition that much more complex, but that much more powerful if you're able to go and do it. So I think, yeah, you hit on some extremely important points on that.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and it's time. It's not easy, that's for sure. And I don't, it takes time. It's constantly changing. Things are so fluid, right? So, but sometimes it's the little things that make a big difference, and so you're not going to change the world. You're not going to change a whole system in one day, right? The Rome wasn't built in a day. That's, it's so true. And so I think it's the little steps in the beginning and trying not to feel overwhelmed with it, make a big difference.
Trying to figure out how to kind of frame these next questions, because we've kind of covered all of it within that. But kind of going back to just specifically AT, and even in your role within the secondary setting, which I know some people might argue, but I would have fun arguing back, is one of the most important for the profession because of the impact it can have on patients early on in their career and exposed to what an athletic trainer is. Having worked in the collegiate level, having people come from a high school where they had a really great athletic trainer just makes my job that much easier. I don't have to win them over. And the ones that didn't have one, or it just didn't go well, like it is a process to get them back. So specifically talking your setting, what are some things you think athletic trainers should do to show that more inclusivity? You talked about it a little bit. It's the safe space, but truly making it a safe space. What other things would you potentially suggest, or that you have implemented and found successful?
Yeah, I think part of that is being involved too in, decision making, being involved in policy making procedures, especially around, non-discrimination policies, around, especially too around mental health. That's a big part, at least from an AT role, right? In healthcare, we're seeing a lot of that. And so I think it's really speaking up, being willing to be involved in all of that, is really important as an athletic trainer. And some people might feel like, and I'm not hired by the district. Again, I'm hired by the hospital, but I've been there for so long at the school that the kids, they don't know any different. They think I'm at school. I've been there 18 years and I get myself involved, even though I'm not at the school full time. I am there every day. And so I am a fixture there. And I think I've made a point to bring up, if I see discrepancies anywhere, that I bring it up to the administrators and I really talk to them about why this is important. One caveat I will say, my job has been very easy in that sense, because the high school that I'm at is the most diverse school district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So they're very well aware there's a lot of resources in place. There's a lot of policies in place. There's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? There's just a lot of work that's put in to make sure that students are recognized for their unique differences that they bring. It's a huge melting pot in this city. And as an AT, what I've had to learn, and I've learned a lot from the students, is the different religions. There's so many different religions that exist. There's so many different cultural traditions that exist, and especially around medicine and Western medicine. So for some of our Asian populations, some of their beliefs around Western medicine are very different. And again, it's not, I have to understand as a healthcare provider how to navigate around that without imposing my own beliefs and what I feel is the best thing to do, as long as that student is obviously safe, and I feel like they are getting the correct care that they need. However, we have to, these are minors as well, and so their parents or their guardians are, the people who have the say. And so it's in the high school setting, dealing with people who are minors, and in this particular setting where I'm dealing with, I've had to learn all, Muslim, Jewish, so many other religions, and like I say, cultures, that I've really had to navigate how I provide care to them, and really try to learn and understand and say, okay, how can I provide this care? And thinking about, if I have to refer, say, a student out somewhere, where do I feel is the best place to refer them, where I know that they'll get the care that they need and they deserve, that's going to be an affirming environment for them, and who will have the same understanding and empathy towards, their situation as I do. And so those are all components of, leadership doesn't necessarily mean you're in a leadership position, or like officially.
Right.
We're leaders all in our own right. And so I think part of being, that inclusive leader in healthcare is, again, going back to understanding the individual themselves, what their culture is, what their beliefs are, what their traditions are, and how to make sure that they're receiving the best care that they can, and that you can provide in that instance.
One more kind of diving into the weeds question, just for more examples on this. You just mentioned, if you saw discrepancies or things that you're wanted to address, your communication with administrators and stakeholders. What have you found to be most effective? And I know this doesn't always transition over, but I know a lot of times just yelling about it on social media probably isn't the most effective way for people to get their point across. But what have you found to be successful that potentially others, if they are seeing things, could kind of at least get a foundation from to build to try and help?
Yeah, I know it always feels good to vent on social media, but it doesn't always, that's not always where impact is going to happen or change is going to happen. And I think going directly to the source. So I've had, if I've noticed something that I feel could be changed or needs to be adapted, I call a meeting with my administrators. So I usually go to my athletic director first. I follow the right chain, and our school principal is very open and receptive. And so we'll usually sit down, talk. I present kind of what the situation is or what I think needs to be adapted. Here are some resources. Here's, kind of some information as to why this is important and what we can do and why this might be needed. And, just going from there. And I think just having that open and honest conversation, and providing information and providing data to kind of back up what you're saying. Trust me, I can be very emotional and I can get because my passion runs so deep. And so when I feel like a student isn't getting the help that they need, or I feel, I take it personally, and I want to do whatever I can for them. But you have to be, you have to be strategic, and you have to stay calm, and you have to really try to take the emotion out of it, so that you can be calm and effective and confident, if that makes sense. And so it's really going directly to the source. Who are the people that that could be those change makers? Who are the people that are heavily involved in decision making that you can go directly to? And I think that's been my best option so far.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing those ideas. Anything we haven't covered around the topic of inclusivity that you would like to before we jump into the athletic training chat questions?
Oh boy. No, I just, like I said, it takes time. It takes, I mean, this has been years. I don't want to say I'm an expert. It's something, again, that I'm just so passionate about, that I'm constantly learning and trying to grow and trying to reflect. So I think the biggest thing you can start with is start doing some self-reflection, kind of think about, like Joel, you earlier, when I was talking about something, you were like, oh, now that I think back to some of the things, in my younger years, okay, now I understand. So just taking some of these points, maybe that were brought up today, doing some self-reflection, how is there anything about yourself that you might need to understand or be aware of, and address those, and just be mindful of that. Be mindful of your own language, be mindful of your own words, be mindful of how you're interacting with others who are different from you. But also at the same time, seeking out people who have different backgrounds from you, different experiences, who might look different from you, and engaging in conversation with them, really just trying to get to know them. You might learn a lot, and you might even learn a lot about yourself. And so I think that's kind of a first step for somebody. Again, it's not going to change in one day, but just being mindful of those little things is a really good start.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Ready to jump into the athletic training track questions?
I am, yeah.
All right.
I don't know why I feel like these are harder than what we just talked about, but let's go with it.
First one is where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years? And that can be as a whole or setting specific, however you want to take that.
God, that is a good question. I honestly see athletic training is becoming so much broader than what it was initially intended to be, right? I mean, the initial, and I do, there's still a lot of people who, they think of athletic trainer, they think of sports, they think of taping ankles and ice bags, and that's kind of where they go, well, some people are just never going to change their mind, and that's fine. But I see it so much bigger. I mean, look at all the different settings that do exist, in the military, working in, the industrial setting, warehouses for injury prevention and ergonomic stuff, and, still obviously secondary school and collegiate. But I mean, our current CEO of our hospital system is an athletic trainer. And so that was his initial background, as being an athletic trainer, and now he's a CEO of a huge hospital system in Massachusetts. I just see athletic trainers being known for so much more in the next 5 to 10 years. And so I do understand a little bit about the name itself. Athletic trainer kind of pigeonholes us a little bit.
Sure.
But I also understand the other side of trying to change that name and then try to reintroduce the profession. That's a very difficult undertaking. So, I see so much possibilities and so much expansion within our skill set. It's just how to market that and how to make more people aware of what we're able to do. But I just see us growing, and my hope is that within the next 5 to 10 years that we are recognized as healthcare providers with all the major insurance companies.
Yep.
To me, that's one of the most important steps to getting the respect and the recognition that we deserve, and getting us in positions where we're, with the pay scales and the benefits and stuff, in that same position as the other healthcare providers that we're right in line with. So that's my hope, is that within the next 5 to 10 years that's where we're at.
I like it. We can go with that, and if it comes true, that's perfect.
I would be very excited.
What advice would you give yourself if you could go back to when you were a younger athletic trainer, and if you could set when that would be?
So when I went to undergrad, that was back in the day when, clinical hours weren't so monitored.
Fair.
I was doing a lot of hours each semester, and a lot of traveling with the college teams as a student AT. And like I said, I got a little burnt out. I was burnt out from everything, and I thought that that's what the profession was coming out of undergrad, and I almost left it completely. And I would say to my younger self, that's not what reality, that's not what it ends up being. That was just your experience in school, but it's, everything's okay. You're going to be okay. And to have a little bit more self-confidence, that was a big barrier for me, is that I wasn't very confident in my abilities. So that might have been part of it, and why I took a little hiatus. And I think by taking that hiatus, I did realize that athletic training was what I was just meant to do. But at the same time, I felt like by taking those few years off, I limited myself, and my growth rate was slowed a little bit as a professional. And so I guess just in that sense, my advice would be, stick with it. It's okay. Again, you're going to be okay. Have that confidence. You know what you're doing. You made it through. You passed. You're certified. Like, you know what you're talking about. You know what you're doing. And just be confident in yourself. But honestly, I think everyone should just go with their gut. Go with your instinct. If this is something you're passionate about, you're doing athletic training, you either love it or you hate it.
Sure.
And if you love it, you're going to be great, and you're going to end up where you should be. Just stick with it.
What has been the most influential resource that you have found in your career?
Ooh. Oh boy. Honestly, I'm going to say my mentors. I've had mentors in different settings. So I had my big mentor in undergrad was our head athletic trainer, a gentleman by the name of Bill Bullock. Some of you, if you're listening to this, might even have been familiar with him. He started the athletic training program at Salem State back in 1975-ish, maybe.
Okay.
To look at him and to know him, you go, he's an athletic trainer. I mean, he was just amazing though. I mean, smart as a whip, but very real, and just very not, he was just that type of guy where maybe he didn't always look the most professional or whatever, but he knew what he was doing, and he had a lot of respect within the NATA as well.
Okay.
He did a lot of work because he worked at Indiana University under Coach Knight, and
Okay.
knew some people down at South Carolina and stuff. So he had a lot of connections, but he was one of my biggest ones in undergrad. He was great because he really did he wasn't judgmental. He really would talk you up. He would support you. He would help you in any way. He passed away from cancer in 2008, and that was really it was a big loss for us, at
Sure.
least in this area. But, I built friendships and had mentorships with people just in the NATA, um, people on the LGBTQ plus committee, that I would never in a million years have probably met otherwise. And those, I want to say, those, it's the people, it's the mentors, the people that I've connected with have been my biggest resource for sure.
Awesome. As an AT in your role, and we've established that you're fairly busy, how do you take care of yourself?
Very busy. Um, I make sure that, so I don't have any kids of my own. And when people ask, I say, well, I have about 600 teenagers. So
Right.
that I'm good.
Right.
And I'm now at that age where the kids who I see are like, oh, Jen, oh, my mom or my parents are the same age as you. And I go, oh God, don't tell me that. Like,
Right. Right.
but anyway, so when I get home, I really try to focus on my family. My family includes my partner, um, and my fur babies. So I have my dog, my cat, and so I make sure that every morning I am taking the dog out, 30, 45-minute walk. That's, it's for her, but it's for me as well.
For sure.
Um, I make sure to disconnect. So that's really important. I see a lot, especially on Twitter, where, in a way, it's almost sometimes a badge of honor that athletic trainers are answering phone calls at 8 o'clock at night, midnight, or, doing this and doing that. And
Yep.
I disconnect. My phone goes on do not disturb. When it's on the weekends and I don't have any games and I'm home and I'm not working, that's it. Unless it's an emergency, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to reach out about it. I just, you have to do that full disconnect. And I find the things that I like to do. I love to read. I love to go to the beach when it's nice weather out. Just really taking the time and doing the things I enjoy doing.
Fantastic. If you could change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a common practice, a mindset, or something of your choosing in the field of
Mm.
athletic training, what would it be?
The mindset that this is how it's always been done.
I like that. Yeah.
And so that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah,
Um, and that could be applied anywhere, but I
for
definitely see
sure.
that a lot in athletic training, and I challenge that every day. Whether it's at the secondary school setting, whether it's in the hospital, same thing,
Yep.
there's processes in place and, oh, well, this is how it's always been done. Well, okay,
I
but that doesn't
cringe
mean,
sometimes.
yeah,
Working in the
you
clinic,
know,
some of the advice that's given from physicians, I was like, yeah, that's no, no.
no, like this, okay, that's just, so I would say that would be the biggest mindset that I would totally eliminate and change.
Love it. Final question before we kind of wrap up. What does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
No, God. Athletic training, it's an identity. I feel like we are a unique set of people. We are willing to sacrifice a lot of our time, and energy for others. And I know a lot of healthcare providers, it's common, but our setting is so unique in all ways. In any, if you're industrial or whatever, our roles are so unique to anything else. And so um it's an identity. It means being somebody who's so committed no matter what, and so passionate, and just truly has so much empathy and care, and making sure that the people that we are taking care of get better. And I think it's hard to explain to other people who don't do it, who aren't in this profession, who to really get them to understand what we do, and why, why we all struggle too in personal relationships, with time management. It's like I see this kind of running joke where it's like people's spouses or significant others are always like, so what time do you think you'll be home tonight? And it's like, well, maybe next week. And I think it's just it's a unique understanding. It's a mindset of, it's not to take it personally. We're just here to really be our best and do what we want to do and take care of others the best way we know how. And I think sometimes we feel like we have a point to prove. So yeah, it's its own identity. And it's, for me, if it means that I'm committed, passionate, then that's what it means.
Awesome. If people wanted to get in touch with you, connect with you, follow you, reach out to get involved in any of the committee work, what would be the best place for them to do that?
I am very active on Twitter, as you know. Wait, what's my Twitter handle?
We'll link it up so people can find
yeah. It's like I'm so Twitter is probably my biggest one in terms of social media and professional. I'm also on LinkedIn and active on LinkedIn, and my email address, and you can certainly link that to the video as well. I'm available by all means. So anybody wants to reach out, have a conversation, looking for ideas or thoughts or resources, yeah, please reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time and being flexible with the scheduling, and really
Thanks,
appreciate
Joel.
sharing your insight on everything here, and look forward to conversations in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We truly appreciate you taking the time. A lot of great things in it. Looking forward to getting more new ones out. We know we've been on a little bit of a break, but they are coming. If you are interested in being on the podcast talking about a topic that is important to you, or just something that you really want to discuss, please let us know. We're happy to have you. We want to hear and tell your story. Again, Mueller Sports Medicine provides so much for not only us, but the athletic training profession. Please check out their new Revive technology. It is affordable pneumatic compression, scientifically backed with some really good insights into what they're doing. We hope to have more information for that for you guys in the future. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.